Hey everyone, this is Pete, and I like racing games. Just recently, I've been thinking about the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 era of gaming, and how that period was an absolutely great time to be a fan of this kind of game. So I thought, why don't we explore that in a bit more detail? This occasional series will cover both my favourites from back in the day, as well as some that I never got around to trying until now. Because these titles were typically filled to the brim with licensed music on their original release, unfortunately my usual approach of playing the game and providing commentary as we explore it together isn't really going to work, so we'll be pulling back to take a broader look at each game as a whole with a more copyright friendly soundtrack to accompany the action. Rest assured though, if you happen to pick one of these games up for yourself, you can turn the music up loud for a wonderful oral snapshot of the time in which it was originally released. We kick things off with a game I never played back on its original release, 2006's MotorStorm for PlayStation 3, published by Sony and developed by British company Evolution Studios, an outfit originally set up by Digital Image Design's Martin Kenwright and Psygnosis co-founder Ian Hetherington. Prior to MotorStorm, Evolution had worked on several World Rally Championship games for the PlayStation 2. I'm not sure why I never played MotorStorm before, because playing it now I recognise that I would have had an absolute blast with it. But well, better late than never. Because this game holds up very well indeed, considering it's almost 20 years old at the time of recording. That's right, HD games are nearly 2 decades old. I think we can probably put the arguments about whether PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 are retro or not to bed at last. But I digress. MotorStorm was first announced under the name Stampede at E3 in 2005, with a series of bullshot trailers that people were quite rightly sceptical about. A little under a year later, a leaked tech demo showed some impressive effects, particularly relating to crashes between vehicles, but audiences and press alike remained unconvinced that the final game would match up to the standards of the initial promotional video. A version of the game that was roughly 50% complete made it to E3 in 2006, followed by 2 demo versions, a kiosk version that allowed players to try out a large number of different vehicles from the game, and a downloadable version that had a more limited lineup of vehicles, but visuals with more detail and a more stable frame rate. The game was pretty well received on its original release, with a few caveats. Chief among these was a perceived lack of content. With just 8 tracks included, and 4 more available via paid DLC, IGN's review by Chris Roper described the game as shallow, while the UK's Games Master magazine said it was severely truncated and ultimately disappointingly lacking. In contrast, Tom Bramwell, penning a review for Eurogamer, noted that, "I like it because it's the first racing game in ages to realise that you don't need 487 tracks, you just need a few really good ones. I like it because it's the first racing game in ages to realise that you just need a simple, straightforward series of excellent races." And I have to say I'm with Bramwell on this one. I've been playing MotorStorm for a while at the time of recording, and I've probably seen most of its tracks at least once by this point. But the game hasn't once felt boring or uninspired, even with its overwhelmingly brown colour palette thanks to its setting of Monument Valley. No, MotorStorm keeps things feeling fresh by sensibly recognising that you absolutely can repeat things without people minding too much, if you put an interesting little twist on them each time. And MotorStorm certainly does that. But let's rewind for a moment and talk about the overall concept here. MotorStorm is based around the idea of a somewhat chaotic motorsports festival that unfolds in Monument Valley in the USA. The event is loosely organised at best. There are courses laid out at several places around the valley, there are set events for you to participate in, and you need tickets to access the game's various challenges, but within the races themselves there aren't many rules. You're free to take whatever route you please around the track, and getting full contact with your opponents isn't frowned upon so much as actively encouraged. Hell, you can even win a race by detonating your vehicle and throwing your driver across the line to pip your nearest opponent to the post. In some respects, MotorStorm feels like an evolution of the adventure racing subgenre that we saw get started in the late 90s, with titles like EA's Beetle Adventure Racing, Rare's Diddy Kong Racing, and Gremlin's Buggy. In contrast to today's open world races, which are a distinct breed, adventure racing games feature courses that have a clear start and finish line, and perhaps checkpoints along the way, though not in the case of MotorStorm, but a relatively open plan in between. Multiple routes and shortcuts abound, and truly succeeding in these titles is as much about understanding which of these routes are the optimal ones as it is about handling your vehicle. MotorStorm makes this even more interesting by making its different types of vehicle more or less suited to various types of terrain, meaning you'll want to take different routes through the same course depending on what you might be driving. Light vehicles such as dirt bikes and ATVs are small and agile enough to take higher, more precarious routes and will get bogged down in muddy patches. Conversely, heavy vehicles such as SUVs and big rigs positively thrive in the mud, but taking them atop a rocky precipice in the hopes of saving a few seconds is generally a very bad idea. This is what I mean about MotorStorm repeating things while putting interesting little twists on them each time. The first race in the game takes place on probably the most open plan of all the courses and gives you the freedom to select any of the vehicle types available. From there on, you're generally given just one or two vehicle types to use in a race, forcing you to adapt and familiarise yourself with all the different driving styles rather than just sticking with one favourite. You do get occasional other free choice events, but for the most part, each race has its own unique restrictions, and it really does make a huge difference. And driving in MotorStorm is super fun. The Monument Valley setting means that each race is a bumpy ride in one way or another, and a lot of the game is spent wrestling with your chosen vehicle's controls just to make it go in a straight line. This is never annoying though, rather it's engrossing and involving, and stops even the supposedly easy races from feeling like you're just going through the motions or grinding your way through the game. A key part of the MotorStorm experience is the use of boost. Unlike other racing games from a similar period, this isn't a resource you accumulate and then use. Instead, after a brief delay for it to charge up in the opening moments of each race, you can trigger it at any time, giving you a burst of acceleration and speed for as long as you hold the button down. This quickly increases your engine's temperature though, and if you let this get too high you'll explode. So while you can and should use the boost a lot in each race, you also need to manage your temperature carefully. Boost isn't just for going fast either, it's actually extremely useful for getting around particularly tight corners too. Hitting the brakes or handbrake to swing your vehicle around, then hitting the boost for a burst of speed in the new direction is essential to success on some courses, and it's always immensely satisfying. Realistic? No, of course not, but we're talking about a game where you can fling yourself off the side of a canyon on a tiny motorbike and survive the eventual impact, so realism is not the primary focus here. Believability is, and that's something a bit different. One of MotorStorm's biggest strengths is that it feels internally consistent and fair. Challenging at times, sure, but never in a way that feels unreasonable. It's rare you'll get into a situation where you'll feel like it's not even worth bothering to try for the rest of the race, which is good because MotorStorm's races are pretty long by genre standards. One of the game's touted features around its original release was the ability to deform the terrain. While those expecting Red Faction level destruction will probably be disappointed, it is noteworthy that things like tyre tracks from previous laps persist throughout the entire race rather than being erased as an internal decal buffer fills up, and muddy parts of the courses do get authentically churned up and wet looking after they've had a pack full of big rigs rumbling over the top of them. And this makes a difference too. A good route to take on the first lap may be a liability by the third, so it's always important to familiarise yourself with the entire course, no matter which vehicle you might be driving. MotorStorm is a simple, straightforward experience that isn't trying to be anything more than the thing it appears to be. It's a game about getting down in the filth with some immensely fun vehicles and playing dirty in your quest to attain first place. It's a game about rocking out to a soundtrack that couldn't be more 2006 if it tried. Writing retrospectively in 2022, Digital Foundry's John Lineman said of MotorStorm that it was one of the first, finest and most fondly remembered of the launch titles for PlayStation 3, a release designed to answer the question posed by each new console generation: what makes a game next gen? I would perhaps go further than that. There are elements present in MotorStorm that still aren't commonplace in other racing games today. The way the track surface degrades as the race proceeds, how the courses are beautifully designed to provide markedly different experiences depending on which vehicle you're driving, the spectacular crashes and damage modelling. Were it not for its relatively low resolution and frame rate by modern standards, MotorStorm would stand up extremely well as a modern release. In fact, I suspect many players would welcome a game with as straightforward a structure as we have here. No experience points, no levelling, no live service elements, no daily quests, no login bonuses, no bullshit at all. Just 8 tracks, a bunch of vehicles to throw at them, and a whole lot of mud. Turns out that's all you need for a good time really. Who knew? And on that note, it just remains for me to say, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.